are your relationships today? Personal, professional. Could they be better? Welcome to Talk Time with Trish, with host Trish Forante and co-host Lisa Stewart. There are so many variables that affect our lives. What makes the difference in our lives is genuine communication. Now, here are your hosts, Trish Forante and Lisa Stewart.
This is Trish Forante, and welcome to Talk Time with Trish. Our show is about improving communication for both men and women. Today we're going to talk about a very, very interesting topic, particularly for all you women out there who want to sort of unlock the key to what goes on in a man's mind. We're going to talk about the unspoken language of men, why men behave as they do. Our guest today is Dr. Ron Mercer, co-owner of the Center for Creative Living, a private psychological practice in Coral Springs, Florida. Dr. Mercer holds a doctorate degree in clinical psychology and a second doctorate degree, a PhD, in adult developmental psychology with specialized training in men's issues. Dr. Mercer has authored 4 books, including, very interesting here, Men in Pause. I love that, Dr. Mercer. And Little Boy Lost. Today we'll talk about his 4th book, which is entitled The Unspoken Language of Men, How Men Are Governed by Ancient Predispositions. Oh, so fascinating. What a fascinating topic. Dr. Mercer, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Well, pleasure to be here.
Again, what an interesting topic. So tell us about the 4 archetypes of men.
Well, you know, the evolution of the book is kind of like an evolution of my own life as a man. So I probably have really begun this whole journey as a young boy growing up in upstate New York, and as I began to study psychology, somehow I evolved into the being a student of Carl Jung. And the archetype structure is a format of understanding male behavior through very ancient, traditional, kind of like anthropological means of associating male behavior to a variety of emotions. And the 4 basic archetypes that the listener really has to understand is, number 1, the orphan. The orphan is our very vulnerable, emotional part of the male. The wanderer, who is the part of us that wants to explore and be alone. A good example of the wanderer on a very simplistic level is the guy with a remote, you know, tuning the channels, the NFL football game, the NBA game, and not wanting to be bothered. The extreme example would be the guy on the Harley getting on his bike and zooming across country. That's the explorer. That's wanderer. Then we have the warrior, who's our businessman. He's the aggressive, take charge, in control. Okay, and then the 4th is the hero martyr. The hero martyr is the guy who's the caretaker, and he can sometimes be such a good caretaker, he becomes somewhat resentful, and then he turns into the martyr. So those are the 4 cornerstones of the archetype theory.
Okay, I only heard 3, so can we go back just a little bit just so that I can make sure that I'm wrapping my arms around this?
You got the orphan.
The orphan.
You got the wanderer.
The wanderer.
The hero martyr, and the warrior.
Okay, the orphan, sorry about that, the wanderer, the hero martyr, and the warrior. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you started to explain just a little bit, which I just find so fascinating, particularly because it seems like so many books out there and so many discussions are about women and how to unlock
absolutely
what goes on in the complicated
very little about men.
Very little. So I think this is wonderful because those of us that are women, we want to know what makes you guys tick.
Absolutely.
What makes you guys tick?
And women are typically my best audience. When I speak in front of women's groups, when I get new patients coming in, men who are new patients, it typically is the girlfriend or the wife or the female CEO who's referring the man into therapy because she has an axe to grind with that particular gentleman. And oftentimes when they come into therapy with me, that's their last resort. The woman has identified me as a specialist that can, if Dr. Ron cannot help you deal more effectively with your interpersonal problems, then either you're out of the marriage, you're out of the job, or whatever. So again, the female audience is a very receptive audience to this theory. Hopefully men will become more receptive as well. They're becoming more receptive. And a radio show like this just kind of exposes the whole Jungian archetype theory even more so.
Well, that's super. Again, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of all the men in my life. My father, right from my father down or up, depending upon how you want to look at it.
Let's start.
And trying to, yeah, really, well, I don't know about that, but, just saying, boy, wouldn't it be great if nothing else to have some sort of roadmap to be able to navigate, not so much change, because I'm not a believer in trying to change other people, but understanding this way things make sense. Things can make sense. It's like putting together a puzzle.
Absolutely.
Things make sense that otherwise don't. So let's go through these. You went through them quickly just to give us a sense of what you're going to talk about. But let's go through these. Let's talk about, there's in Jungian psychology, as we both know, there's a yin and a yang. There's a positive and a negative. There's a white and a black. There's a good and a bad.
Polarity.
Okay, that's a nice word. I'm thinking of something else, but I'll reserve my thoughts on that. But if we can, the 4 archetypes, let's go through the yin and the yang of each of the archetypes.
Okay.
And tell me your thoughts. This is just so interesting.
Well,
I'm so excited.
And Trish is talking about the duality that Jung is known for, the anima animus. Anima is the male feminine energy. Okay. The animus is the male energy. So Jung believed that men had a combination of male and female energy, kind of like testosterone and estrogen, kind of like
yeah,
thing.
well, but what did he do? I have to ask. During football season, Sunday afternoons,
some men are more in touch with their female energy than others, and the female energy, by the way, guys, is the part of us that is a very good communicator in and out of the bedroom. So, if you want to be there with your woman on a sexual, intimate, physical, nurturing level, you better be in touch with your feminine side. Very important. It's got nothing to do with being weak or being vulnerable. It's got to do with being powerful and being tuned in with the need of the female. Very important part. So the orphan is our vulnerable, emotional side. He's the real foundation of our archetype. Okay? With that being said, there is a combination in the orphan of both the negative and the positive orphan. The negative orphan is a guy that might feel very vulnerable. He might be hurt in relationships. The extreme vulnerability of an orphan archetype would be an addictive male, a male who is either into alcohol or drugs or maybe binging and gambling or whatever. That's the negative orphan. The positive orphan is the guy who's a creative guy, he's a musician, he's funny, he's humorous, he's emotional, he's nurturing. So again, every archetype has a duality. The goal of the archetype theory is to get the guy to become aware of what are his 2 driving archetypes and to be able to integrate all 4 of the cornerstone archetypes, and then ultimately we reach the magician. For example, the Wanderer, which we talked about, has 2 sides. The Wanderer is a wonderful explorer. He's creative. He's searching, but he can also wander too much at times. He can wander away from his significant relationships. He can be too isolated. So his job is to kind of tailor that energy. If he's going to be in a relationship with a female, a significant other, the Wanderer has to be able to still wander, because he doesn't want to lose his soul, but he has to also be committed to the relationship. The hero martyr, very interesting guy. The hero martyr, I certainly can relate to people like Mr. Clinton, who was raised in a family, Bill Clinton, where there was quite a bit of addiction in the family. And the hero martyr can be the codependent personality. They're very caring. They're very good caretakers. They can also become very resentful of the fact they are the caretaker.
Okay, let's stop for a second just to clarify a couple of things for our listening audience. You and I both know what codependent means, but let's talk about that for the listeners who have heard the phrase, because it's so trendy to use that phrase, but what does it mean?
What it basically means in the Jungian circles is if the martyr hero archetype, if the guy who has that archetype very strongly is taking care of his family, taking care of his wife, his kids, and he's doing a great job with it. If he feels he's being overburdened with the caretaking and doesn't have enough time to realize his wanderer spirit, his business warrior archetype, he may begin to become somewhat resentful. If he's married to a woman who's an addictive alcoholic, or let's say an addictive cocaine addict, he may become her codependent. In other words, he's basically now fostering her addiction. He's taking care of her and not really helping her. And now he's falling into a real bad syndrome. It's not always the guy who has the main psychological problem. His female partner might be the more pathological or conflicted of the two. So the martyr has to really watch it. If he goes over the boundary of too much caretaking, he's going to get burned out. He's going to be the male kind of Joan of Arc and get burned at the stake, metaphorically speaking.
That's Bill Clinton, in your opinion?
Well, Bill's an interesting guy. When I saw Bill growing up, not to see him literally, but here's a guy that grew up in a family, single mom, brother was a cocaine addict. Bill was just the proverbial brain. He was a genius. Yep. And he was the main guy in the family. But he came from an alcoholic addiction family. So my thought was, anybody growing up, a child of an alcoholic, a child of a drug addict brother, there's going to be some problems in that personality. That caretaking part of him, that codependent part, is going to somehow act out in the Oval Office. And again, I think it probably did happen.
Okay, let's hold on to that because sure. I know everybody out there loves hearing about Bill Clinton.
He's a great archetype.
Well, and that's a great one to anchor. And by anchor, folks, what I mean by that is a way to remember that's Bill Clinton as an archetype, just sort of taking a look at him is a great way to have the listeners.
But he's a combination of several.
Yep. What we are getting ready to take a short break. This is Trish Forante, and my guest today is Dr. Ron Mercer. You're listening to Talk Time with Trish on Voice America Health and Wellness channel. Please stay tuned.
Better communication means better relationships in every sense of the word. When you communicate more effectively and interact more effectively, your life is lived more effectively. Tune in to Talk Time with Trish, featuring host Trish Forante and co-host Lisa Stewart. Our program is all about the human element. We are all comprised of parts and stuff that we may be aware of or others may be aware of. When we become aware of what others are aware of, it means more to us. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.